What's up, work fam? This is Trevor back from the Garage of Dreams, and today we're going to cover a topic of overtraining and how to avoid it with work. When we talk about overtraining, there's a lot of different things that can contribute to it, but the main thing that we're concerned with is your overall workload. So workload, when it comes to fitness, is measured with reps, sets, weight, and intensity. When we add those things together and then we combine it with either too much of this or poor sleep and maybe stress outside of the gym, a lot of the times that can lead to overtraining. And overtraining isn't super obvious. Sometimes it's the inability to get good sleep. It's injuries that maybe feel like very small at the time but just don't seem to go away. And then all the way to just the straight up feeling of hitting plateaus when you're training should be leading to PRs. So a lot of the times there's athletes out there that like to say that they keep from overtraining based on feel, right? That's extremely challenging. Your body is a very multifaceted system. And so rather than relying on feel, what we believe at WurQ is the science of load management. So load management is a concept of comparing your chronic workload to your acute workload. So your chronic is defined as 28 days or 4 weeks worth of training, averaging that to understand our baseline or our chronic amount of load that we experience in our training. And we compare it to our acute load that we experience, which is 7 days or 1 week of training. So in load management, we have 2 areas when you compare your chronic to your acute training load. The first is if our acute exposure, right, the amount of training we've done in the past 7 days, is 20% less than our chronic, we can experience a scenario where we're not truly making progress. And then on the opposite side of things, if we experience 20% more acute training load compared to our chronic, we can expose ourselves to injury. Of course, this is a really fine area because we want to expose ourselves to more in order to create those adaptations, but too much compared to what we've been experiencing can really lead to some downsides. So this is a very complex topic that we are trying to help you experience and get accustomed to with WurQ. So how does WurQ do this? So instead of just managing your workload through feel or something like that, we are going to measure workload 3 different ways. First thing is by type of movement. We're going to compare weightlifting, gymnastics, and conditioning load when you use that work strap and you record what you're doing. The next thing is we're going to use biometrics. So whether the movement is in a certain joint or is exposing a certain muscle to stress. And then third, we're going to use movement patterns, right? You've heard, if you've been training for a while, a push versus pull, hinging, core flexion, knee flexion. A lot of those different types of movement patterns we experience in a lot of different ways when we train hard in functional fitness. So WurQ is going to use those different areas and different categories to help you prevent overtraining, okay? So how do we prevent overtraining with WurQ? We're going to first build a baseline. We referenced our chronic training load as 4 weeks of essentially data. You need to feed your WurQ our process in order to get a good baseline of where you're at. The next step, spotting the patterns. So if you have a solid exposure of your chronic training load, we can begin to spot patterns of what looks different. Are you experiencing 20% less of the acute load this week and we're maybe going to not make progress? Are you pushing too hard and we're going to expose ourselves at risk for injury? Then finally, we need to adjust our training. This doesn't mean you have to rewrite the entire training plan, but what it does mean is we can make small tweaks to our training, increase rest times, maybe change a more intense day to more of a recovery day in order to get you in a consistent path, avoiding overtraining and continuing to make progress. All right, not nothing to it, but to go out and put in the work.